Do you want to know what's going to happen in the week ahead? Well, this is the place to find out. So pay close attention because there's a lot going on. All right, let's take a look at what's going to happen in the week ahead. First and foremost, we never have a lack of them except for a little bit of time right before FOMC meetings. But the Fed folks, the folks who work at the Fed, the FOMC members, the people that actually vote on interest rate policy, that determine the health or non-health of your portfolio are these FOMC members. And boy, did they like to talk. And the week behind, they talked a lot and they impacted the markets. And guess what? In the week ahead, they're going to be talking a lot as well. So in the week ahead, we have a lot of Fed speakers and we're going to have to pay attention to what they say because we did see recently a notable shift from more dovish talk to more hawkish talk. We're going to watch that closely to see if that changes in the week ahead. Next, we also get from those Feds, we have Fed minutes, the FOMC meeting minutes from the last FOMC meeting. We get to see a little bit more in depth on what happened. What was the tug of war like between the hawks and the doves? My suspicion is we're going to see things that we probably don't want to see, which means the hawks are still holding on quite tightly. I expect that, and I think many of my colleagues do, because of how Jerome Powell spoke at his press conference after the release of the policy last time. He was a little bit more conciliatory toward the hawks. He made some sort of hawkish statements, which just implied to everybody that maybe he doesn't have everyone on the FOMC on the same page. Well, we're going to see on what pages all those folks are on when we look at those Fed minutes this week. We look closely at that stuff. I want to take a moment to remind you, if you like this type of content, click like and subscribe because we post these videos every single day. You will hear on that day what the Fed said. If they said something important, we're going to drop them and you're going to hear it from us here first. Also this week, we have a number of Treasury auctions. Why do we watch Treasury auctions, right? They're pretty boring, and the output from these auctions probably makes no sense to most people. However, we watch these certainly at this point, for one important reason, and that is to see if any bond vigilantes are coming back into the market. We've talked about bond vigilantes on a number of our videos, but the bond vigilantes are those folks that express their dismay with the deficit or with policy or with inflation. And you see that based on their appetite for these Treasury auctions, right? How much the government is actually auctioning, right? That's the supply of debt that they have to change based on the deficit, right? So that's exactly where the deficit actually touches the ground, right? So that's really the where the rubber meets the road, where the deficit turns into debt, right? The higher deficit, more debt, and that determines where yields are and how well those treasuries are received by those bidders that are out there. If they're bidding, if they have strong bids for that, that means something. If they back away, that means something else. So we watch that. And there are a bunch of interesting auctions this week, a lot of bill auctions, not so exciting, a 20-year auction, not huge, but exciting. That is where we would see, if we would, where these potential bond vigilantes will jump in. We saw a gain in yield last week a little bit. So we'll see how that translates into bond auctions next week. Will people jump in to try to pick up that yield? Or will they join the bandwagon and try to raise yields higher yet? So that's important. Next week, we also have a number of interesting earnings announcements from a number of companies. High level, we start to get a lot of the retailers next week, and I'm going to mention those. But the pivotal one that we get next week is the mother of all growth stocks, the largest company on the S&P 500, the largest company in the NASDAQ composite, and that is NVIDIA. We finally get NVIDIA. the last of the Mag 7s, the ultimate pick and shovel for the AI ecosystem. We're going to hear from them this week. And I can assure you that whatever the published target is, everyone is secretly expecting them to earn even more and to dazzle us with their performance. I could tell you that what happens on that day is going to determine not only the market, the overall market the next day, but the day after and possibly even beyond. So we're going to get NVIDIA this week. Maybe you should pay attention to that. We also get Palo Alto Networks this week, right? Palo Alto, another good, solid old company, one of the first companies in the security space. We're going to hear from them this week. That's very broadly held security stock, also very much tied to to this new sort of AI build out. So we want to hear what Palo Alto has to say, certainly about their customers, right? How strong are they? Are they going to give us a similar story that we got last week from Cisco? Are they going to tell us something better? Better pay attention, because it's more than just earnings. It's about the AI ecosystem this week and maybe the health of how the whole growth area of stocks behaves going forward. Okay, I mentioned retailers. We got the biggies. We got Walmart. Walmart, the mother of all retailers. And so we get to hear from them. Walmart's always a great story because not only will we hear about how they're doing with tariffs, but Walmart also has a very large digital play. And it's a very well-managed company. And it's also a company that people grasp when things are getting a little shaky, right? Because everyone, even in the worst case scenario, goes to a Walmart. And so we're going to hear from Walmart this week. We're also going to hear from Lowe's and Home Depot this week. Those, of course, highly tied to the construction and building area. So we want to hear how are we doing there. But remember, they also buy a lot of their products from overseas, which are subject to tariffs. There were some interesting developments between the two in past quarters in terms of some saying that they're going to pass their increases, price increases to consumers. Others, like Home Depot, others decided that they were going to eat those increased costs because they want to do what they refer to as capture, right? Market capture. So they're going to let Lowe's raise their prices along with the tariffs, but they're going to keep their prices low because they think that a customer will not buy a hammer at Lowe's, but they'll buy it more cheaply over at Home Depot. We'll see if they're right. And we're going to hear from them this week. And we'll also hear about the health of the building and housing market. So that's that. Target. Target is a really interesting one. Target could kind of very loosely be put in the same category as Walmart, but not really, because Target is more of a differentiated play, not necessarily a cost leadership play like Walmart. Target has been struggling a lot recently. A lot of management missteps happen over at Target. It's a pretty broadly held company, has a lot of fabulous potential, hasn't realized it yet. This will hopefully be their quarter. So we'll pay attention and see what happens there. Williams-Sonoma is also coming out this week. TJX is also coming out this week. TJX, known for discounted retail, TJ Maxx, Marshalls. Those companies, a lot of analysts really like TJX because it's viewed as a company that will fare well even in a shaky economy. However, a lot of their goods do come from overseas and could be possibly subject to tariffs. So this week, I suspect that the word tariff will come back onto the tips of all of our tongues, especially because it's a retail week. It'll be interesting to see how often that word is brought up on their earnings calls. I am going to certainly be listening. You don't have to. You do have to be watching our videos, though, because we will be reporting those as they come out. And so we're going to pay attention to those so you don't have to. That's kind of what we do around here. So we talked about retail data and sentiment. That's important. I also want to bring up, guess what? Thanksgiving's coming up. That means Black Friday's coming up. And so that is the prelude to the strongest part of the year for most of these retailers. Of course, we want to hear what's going on from them. How are they stocking? How are their inventories looking? What are they seeing? Are there any early things that they're seeing? What are they going to do to beat the other guy to get that customer to click buy? And we're going to pay close attention to that. Again, the most important part of the year for these retailers right now. So also this upcoming week, let's talk about first some of the, well, I'm going to get into the economic numbers in a second, but let's start with the theme, follow on of the theme that has been happening over the last couple of weeks. We talk a lot about sector or market rotations, these large rotations where market leadership went from maybe the tech growth stocks to more broad leadership in the market. Next week, well, we're going to be watching closely to see if that continues, or Friday's reversal was really a reversal, or was it just dip buyers trying to buy the dip, or whether or not that follows through. So you can certainly count on the fact that we're going to be watching very closely how the Dow performs versus how the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 perform. That's going to be a big theme to watch in the week ahead. Shutdown after effects. The government is no longer shut down. At least we've been told that. However, we have not been able to get any data yet. Now, of course, we don't expect them to collect all this data overnight. This is an ongoing effort, and then they have to put the numbers together. They have to work their statistical magic on these numbers, and then they have to release them. So we may or we may not start to get some of those numbers next week. That's certainly what's going to be important for us. And of course, we're always going to be listening for any longer term impacts that may have come from the shutdown. But we're still going to be talking about it, unfortunately, for a little bit going forward. And so that is a high level theme, but let's get into some of the economic numbers. Okay. First and foremost, a number that I know we're going to get next week is a number that we covered in depth last week. And we got a number, we at least one really good video about this that you should check out, which is this new ADP number that they have started releasing. They started releasing it last week. That's their NER Pulse number, right? And that's that weekly employment situation where they literally tell you the 4-week moving average of job cuts or growths, the net of that, right? And last week it was coming down and it kind of surprised everybody. Well, we want to see if that trend continues. So we're going to watch that number that comes out Wednesday. You don't have to be up when it comes out because guess what? We're going to be up and we're going to report that to you. That's a really important number, guaranteed that everyone is going to be watching that. That's going to be one of the hottest watches on a weekly basis going forward. I can assure you that. So that number comes out this week, in the week ahead. Now, also this week, in the week ahead, we get housing numbers, right? So I don't know which ones we're going to get. Some of them are private. Some of them come from government agencies. So we may or may not get those numbers. But we'll get the NAHB housing market index because it's a private number. And we may get the others that I meant that would come in that series starting in this week ahead. We may get industrial production. That's an important one. We may get factory orders. We may get durable goods orders. Okay. These are really, really important in trying to assess where we are with GDP growth and whether the economy is expanding or contracting. I hate to be like this, but we may get them. We may not get them. We don't know yet. But I watch those every single day. And if anything important comes out, we certainly will drop them here before everyone else figures them out. We talked about FOMC meeting minutes that's coming this week. We are going to get the leading economic index, right? That's from the Conference Board. That's a long-running index that's supposed to give you some insight into where the economy might be going. Supposedly a leading indicator. That is coming out this week. We're expecting a slight potential downtick there on that number. And let's see what else we got coming out this week. Oh, okay. We also have another interesting one this week. We get the S&P Global Manufacturing and Services Flash PMIs, right? We talk about these purchasing managers indexes, right? And these PMIs are like corporate, corporate sentiment indicators, right? They're really important to get a understanding of how companies are thinking, whether they expect to be hiring more or less, whether they're their orders are going up or going down, whether they expect them to go up or go down. So they're really important, right? Because these are actually their surveys, but they're from companies, right? And companies are pretty rational. So it's an interesting way to understand what might be happening certainly with employment. And this is a flash number, so it comes out twice a month, comes out once at the beginning, once at the end. And we're going to get that from S&P Global this week. One to watch for sure. At the end of the week, we're going to end up with University of Michigan consumer sentiment, right? We got the preliminary number last week, which was weak as anything. And we'll see, because they'll revise everything for month end. We'll see if they revise up or they revise down. But those are private numbers that we know we're going to get this week. We may end up getting some numbers that we missed in the past week, right? So we missed CPI, right? Consumer Price Index, inflation. And we may get that next week. We don't know. We'll find out. But it would be nice to know that, right? Because, inflation's a thing and it's a problem, and it definitely is part of the Fed's calculus in deciding what it does. And PPI, Producer Price Index, which is a leading indicator of CPI, right? Producers happen before consumers, right? So we want to know if their prices are going up, their input costs are going up. We were supposed to get that this past week, but we may get it next week. And that would be very interesting if we do end up getting that, in fact, next week. It's not even on the docket at this point, but anything can happen. Anything goes. And we're going to find out. And we will let you know first before anyone else finds out, because that's what it is that we do. So we have that, and we have a number of other earnings. I only highlighted some of the important ones. But there are definitely going to be some very interesting economic numbers that are going to come out in the week ahead. Some we know, some we're not so sure. But you can rest assured that if we get them, we're going to drop those bombs before everyone else knows about them, before the market even figures them out, because that's what we do. I want to remind you again, if you like this kind of content, click like, click subscribe. If you have any thoughts on all these things that we discussed today, on what it is that, and also what it is that you're expecting in the week ahead, we'd love to know, because we like to respond with videos. We want to know what your thoughts are. So come to us all the time, because we drop them here before the market figures them out.